Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Hong, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Reserve. We're based here in New York. Reserve is a service that helps you find a great restaurant, makes it easy for you to book a table, and handles payment automatically at the end of your dining experience. We're currently live in 350 of the nation's best restaurants across 6 cities. And today, we're super excited to announce that we will soon be launching our 7th city, which will be Washington, D.C. Yeah! So today I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about why dining will be the next wave of disruption in the travel space. But first, a little bit of history. So when I think about dining, I often think about dining as it relates back to the early to late 90s. And at the time, you had a lot of restaurateurs that were going through a little bit of an evolution. If you think back to that time, there were a lot of pen and paper. There was an electronic reservation book revolution, if you will, and they also got point-of-sale systems that started to make their process of running the restaurant much more efficient. At the time, there was a lot of Windows 95 machines and servers in the closets. And sure enough, now some 15, 20 years later, as I as a technology provider start talking to restaurants, I'll walk into restaurants, and as I sit across the table from them, they'll have a computer, and sure enough, it'll have Windows 95 on it, and they'll have a server in the closet, right? So not a lot has changed in the last 20 years, at least as it relates to technology. That said, on the dining side of things have changed quite a bit. So if you look at this photo, there's a gentleman here, he's serving wine, and when we all go out to eat now, we enjoy a glass of wine, we enjoy friends, we enjoy having conversation. That's really what dining has evolved into. It's gotten away from this kind of standardization. So, when you think about the dining space as a whole and kind of how it's evolved, it's about these really unique, authentic experiences. For myself, I think back to about a year and a half ago when I was actually out with an advisor of ours in Boston. I was sharing a similar experience to this. And he said to me something in that moment that was so poignant. He said, dining will be the last form of live entertainment. And I want you guys to think about that for a second. Dining is the last form of live entertainment, right? As we start to take more and more of the experiences that we have and they become more and more digitized, we're going to want and yearn for these really authentic, wonderful experiences where we can share and break bread together. That's what we as individuals start to really gravitate towards as really our society becomes more and more digitized. That said, the crazy part about all this is that we're seeing this authenticity happen at scale, right? The restaurant industry is a $709.2 billion industry. It's a huge industry. And it's made up of about 1 million restaurants in the US here. And the point about uniqueness is really matched to the fact that 7 in 10 restaurants are actually single unit operators. Right? So these are your mom and pop type places, the places where the owners built it with their own 2 hands. They love the restaurant. They want to be there every night. They want to make sure you have these wonderful experiences, and they're going to come in to make sure that they greet their loyal customers each and every night. All of that in mind, the restaurant space is incredibly competitive. Full 60% of restaurants will fail within the first 3 years of operating. For those of you guys that don't know that about the restaurant space, and as much as everyone thinks about the food space growing, there's still a ton of competition. And you have, as such, a ton of turnover. As a technology provider in the space, when we look at actually going after, figuring out how to get more and more restaurateurs to use our service and so forth, it's a little bit like hand-to-hand combat. So if you think of any other industry with 1 million restaurants, you might try and figure out who's the person that I'm going to go after that's going to help me capture 20% market share, 2% market share. In that case, that'd be about 20,000 restaurants. Well, think about New York here. Think about David Chang. Think about John George. Think about these major restaurateurs, the ones that are really leading the way for what we as individuals experience when we go out to eat. Those restaurateurs, they have something more in the order of 20 restaurants, not 20,000. Right? And these are the very people that I work with every day to try and influence how technology actually gets incorporated into our dining experience. It's a difficult space to be in. That said, the space is really ripe for disruption, and it's changing. And why is it changing? That's really the big question. And I think first and foremost, it's because we as consumers, we want it to change. Right? If you think about what restaurants are, they are at their core about 2 things. They're about great food and great hospitality. They've been that way for centuries, right? That's the core part of their business, and any great business focuses on what their core competencies are. Technology has always played kind of a supporting role in that. You think of what technology is in the restaurant space, and more now, you have these diners that are requesting to have more technology in their experience. I talk to managers that will tell me, great, can you have this diner stop texting me for a reservation? Because they do that all the time, right? Or you have diners that are saying, I want to have a payment experience that is much more based in seamless payment, the way I get out of my Uber car, and at the end of the experience, it's all automated, right? And that's where diners are really pushing this space towards a new direction. And you're seeing a ton of investment in the food and tech hospitality space to actually support that. There's a lot of opportunity there. So let's talk a little bit about how that's changing. Technology is playing a big part in this, and there's three big ways in which the space is changing. The first is as it relates to restaurant discovery, so helping you find a place to go out to eat. Seems simple, but it's not. The second big part of this is booking a table at a restaurant. Starting to align interests through technology to actually make it so that way we as diners can actually be more aligned with our restaurants when we actually want to make a reservation. The experience part is a little bit different in the sense that, again, restaurants are so focused on great food and great hospitality, and there's really not a lot that technology can do there quite yet. I don't know if any of you here have had a 3D printed hamburger quite yet, but until that day happens, I don't think there's going to be a ton of tech that gets involved there. Final piece of this is about payment. So when we talk about payment, how do we start to streamline that process? Make it really elegant, easy, hospitable, all of the words that we really want when we go out to eat to have these wonderful experiences. So let's talk about the first one of these, restaurant discovery. So for those of you guys that were at the opening party 2 nights ago, we're in Times Square. And I know for myself and maybe some of the others that you guys might have left the party and walked downstairs, and there you are in Times Square. You're trying to figure out where to go out to eat, you're hungry, you've had a few drinks. Now what do? Right? If I have my hotel and it's in Tribeca, the ideal solution here would be to have a concierge that could actually handle that for me. But I'm not in my hotel lobby. So what do I do at that moment? Right? The ideal form of this is really what hospitality has done so well for so many years. They said, let's take the concierge though, and now technology providers are starting to say, how do we digitize that experience instead? And now I'm downstairs, I'm in Times Square, I pull out my phone, and sure enough, I have an option. I have a concierge in my pocket, something that, and some app that can potentially take care of me and start to help make these decisions easier. That process becomes much more streamlined. And if you think about travelers, right, maybe you're going to San Francisco and you don't have a hotel booked. You don't have a concierge that you can even reach out to. And that access piece of the concierge starts to actually be available to you potentially weeks in advance. Maybe you have a business dinner and you want to plan for it. Well, that concierge element, at least the digitized one, starts to really make a huge impact in your ability to do so. Let's talk about the next part of this, right? Booking a table. So there's all these tables that are appearing on screen here, and I think why we actually have this slide is because when you think about the restaurant industry and what it actually takes to actually find a reservation at one of your favorite restaurants, it's hard. A lot of times we talk about it as being semi-transparent. So you finally go through this discovery process, you figured out where you wanted to eat, and now you're on Carbone's website. For those of you guys that don't know, it's a great restaurant here in New York, and they don't have any 7 o'clock times available. And why is that? Right? You'd think they'd want to seat as many people through their website as possible. But if you actually start to understand how the technology works, and most of the technology providers that restaurants will use, they're used to paying anywhere between 25 cents to $1 to seat diners in their restaurant. Right? Compare that to actually seating somebody that calls in over the phone, somebody that walks into the restaurant. That's free. So now why would I, as a restaurant, want to pay anything incremental to seat the same diners into my restaurant again and again, when alternatively, I can just wait for the walk-ins, I can wait for the phone calls. That's much, much cheaper, and ultimately, it's really why we see this kind of lack of transparency into restaurant tables. So what starts to change about that? Where does technology play a role? Well, as technology providers start to get a little bit smarter about this, and they start to work with restaurants, get them to a place where they can actually align interest, encourage restaurants to list tables digitally for free, or even in some cases we're seeing some providers that will pay restaurants for this. You now start to get more available inventory for diners that's available on the website. And that's better for really the restaurant because it saves them time, and it's better for all of us as diners because now you have a more transparent marketplace. And let's talk about the third part of this experience, right? The payment experience. Right? And we have this great visual here. You're looking at the bill, you've had this wonderful meal, you shared the authentic experience, and now inevitably the server has to figure out who's going to pay the bill. And trust me when I tell you, it's just as awkward for a server as it is for everyone around the table, because they're trying to figure out who the right person to put that bill down in front of is. While at the same time, everyone around the table is sitting there looking at each other going, all right, maybe it's date night, so am I going to pull out my wallet? Are you going to pull out your wallet? Maybe you're sitting there with your kids and you're fending off a kid with one arm and trying to pay the bill with the other. Maybe you're there with your in-laws and it's World War III, or it's about to be World War III, as you're about to pay the bill. Right? Never a fun experience. But technology can really play a role here in making that experience more fluid and more elegant. When you start to look at things that really can influence this, things like automated tip calculation, things like house accounts, things like check splitting, right? All done before you even get to the restaurant. And what you end up with is a scenario where now you have changed the conventions of the way we think about payment. You know, there's a good term that I use, and it's a good phrase that I use with a lot of our team and a lot of the restaurants that I talk to. I often tell them that invisible payment should be the only form of payment, right? The restaurant already knows you're coming in, you already have a reservation booked, just connect the dots, go through the entire experience, and take care of me as a diner without me having to lift a finger. At that point now, instead, you have servers that are spending more time and doing really what they want to be doing, which is saying a thoughtful goodbye to their guests rather than dealing with 8 credit cards in a pot, and diners that are actually just saying goodbye rather than fighting over the bill. Excuse me. So this all starts to come together when you actually tie the entire experience together. You build a platform that actually can, you know, help people make and find where they want to go out to eat much easier. When you figure out how you actually want to help them book a reservation and start to align interests. And finally, by making payments streamlined and elegant, all through better uses of technology. For my part, at Reserve, I'm very excited to play a part in this and this evolution, this renaissance for the restaurants that we work with. We want to make a difference for them. We want to make it less transactional and more about hospitality. And if we can do that, we'll win and they'll win. And all of you will win. So thank you guys.